Patrick practically lived his whole life in his room. Growing up, he avoided going out and would have panic attacks when surrounded by crowds. His parents hoped he'd get better as he grew up, but things only got worse. Eventually, he never came out of his room and was homeschooled. One day, Patrick noticed a new family had moved into the house next door. Curious, he peeked through his window and spotted a boy his age dancing and undressing in his room. Patrick thought to himself, is he crazy? Doesn't he realize his window is see-through? Suddenly, the boy turned, locking eyes with Patrick. Startled, Patrick hastily closed his curtains, hoping he hadn't been seen. A few minutes later, he cautiously reopened them, only to find the boy standing right in front of his window. Patrick jumped back, exclaiming, "Oh, my God." After regaining his composure, Patrick approached the window and asked the boy, "How did you get here?" The boy casually replied, "By walking." Before Patrick could react, the boy climbed through the window and into Patrick's room. Patrick began to protest, "You can't just climb," but was interrupted as the boy leaned in close, saying, "I wanted to get a good look at the pervert who was spying on me." Patrick quickly defended himself, insisting he wasn't spying, but the boy interrupted again, asking for Patrick's name. Reluctantly, Patrick replied, "Patrick." The boy nodded and repeated his name, then stared at Patrick for a moment before asking, "Aren't you going to ask for my name?" Patrick responded bluntly, "I'm not interested." Undeterred, the boy introduced himself as Bobby. Just then, Patrick heard his mom's voice asking if he was talking to anyone, accompanied by the sound of her footsteps approaching his room. He hurriedly pushed Bobby out through the window and slammed it shut, not even bothering to check if Bobby had landed safely. The next day, Patrick heard a knock on his window. Opening it, he found Bobby in his school uniform standing outside. Patrick asked, "What do you want?" Bobby replied, "I forgot to get your number." He swiftly snatched Patrick's phone, entered his own number, and called it to exchange numbers. Returning Patrick's phone, Bobby asked, "Do you prefer texts or calls?" Patrick replied curtly, "Neither." Bobby smirked, waving his phone to Patrick and said, "I'll text you," before leaving. Patrick glanced at his phone and saw that Bobby had saved his number as "my hot neighbor." Disgusted, he changed it to "lunatic." As Patrick sat in bed, he received a text from Bobby. Apart from his family, Patrick had never texted anyone else before. Feeling nervous and unsure of what to reply, he would pace around his room, pondering his response. Eventually, he would settle on a one-word reply. While pacing and contemplating, he heard a knock on his window. Opening it, he found Bobby outside once again. Patrick asked, "Why are you here again?" Bobby replied, "You take too long to reply," then climbed into the room and sat on Patrick's bed. Bobby then remarked, "Ever since I moved here, I've never seen you outside. What school do you go to?" Patrick replied, "Homeschool." Bobby asked, "Where is that?" Patrick stared blankly, and Bobby quickly realized, "Oh, you're being homeschooled. That must be really boring. Don't you ever get bored? Do you want to join me and my friends to go watch a movie?" Patrick replied that he couldn't go out, and Bobby remarked, "Why, are you a real-life Rapunzel? Then I'll be your Flynn Rider," before bursting into laughter, which stopped abruptly when he met Patrick's serious expression. Bobby then said, "It's okay if you don't want to go." Patrick rolled his eyes and pulled Bobby off his bed, pushing him out the window. In the following days, Bobby visited Patrick's window every day, and as soon as Patrick opened it, he would climb in. Patrick found himself enjoying Bobby's company more and more. Apart from his parents, he had never had anyone to have enjoyable conversations with and spend time with. His relationship with his sister was strained, as she felt neglected by their parents, who seemed to prioritize Patrick's needs over hers. She rarely spoke to him. One day, Bobby excitedly informed Patrick that his birthday was coming up in a week and invited him to the party he was planning. Patrick lashed out, "I told you I can't go out," tears streaming down his face. Bobby stood there, stunned, and softly said, "I didn't know you were serious about that." He then hugged Patrick, apologizing. Bobby inquired if Patrick had a medical condition preventing him from going outside, prompting Patrick to open up about his severe panic attacks triggered by crowded places. Bobby suggested that Patrick could avoid crowded places, but Patrick replied, "Do you think I haven't tried?" Bobby then asked if Patrick had seen any doctors, but Patrick replied that he had, but they were of no use. Bobby hugged Patrick once more, and Patrick asked, "Why do you keep hugging me?" Bobby admitted, "I don't know what else to say or do apart from hugging you." Patrick formed a light smile and reciprocated the hug, but by merely holding on to the tips of Bobby's shirt. On Bobby's birthday, he didn't show up at Patrick's window as he usually did. Patrick sent him a text wishing him a happy birthday, but Bobby didn't respond. Sitting on his bed, feeling sad and lonely, Patrick imagined Bobby having fun with his friends at his party. Just then, he heard a knock on his window. Hurrying to open it, he found Bobby standing there, holding a cake. Surprised, Patrick asked, "Aren't you supposed to be at your birthday party? Why are you here?" Bobby climbed in and explained that he had canceled the party. Patrick wondered if it was because of him, and Bobby replied, "Well, I always throw big parties on my birthday, but I thought it would be nice to have a simple celebration with just a close friend." Patrick asked, "Do you consider me as a friend?" Bobby was taken aback, responding with surprise, "Didn't you consider me a friend? What did you think we were this whole time?" Patrick explained, "I've never had friends, so I don't know how friendship works." Bobby leaned in close to Patrick's face and said reassuringly, "Listen to me. We are friends, close friends, okay?" Patrick nodded. Bobby then set the cake down and remarked, "You didn't wish me." Patrick insisted, "I did." Bobby retorted, "Texting doesn't count. You have to wish me in person." Patrick then wished him a happy birthday again. Bobby asked, "Do you have a gift for me?" Patrick nervously admitted that he hadn't prepared any gift. Bobby noticed a bracelet on Patrick's wrist, took his hand, removed the bracelet, and asked, "Can I have this then?" Patrick nodded, and Bobby requested Patrick's help in putting the bracelet on. After Patrick assisted him, they both sat on the bed, enjoying the cake and watching a movie together. Since that day, the two boys became even closer. Patrick eagerly looked forward to seeing Bobby every day. One day, Patrick waited for Bobby, but he didn't show up. He overheard his parents and his sister Darcy arguing about their decision to move to a smaller town for Patrick's sake. Feeling responsible for the tension, Patrick couldn't bear to listen. Desperate for Bobby's comforting presence, he waited for him while scrolling through his phone. Stumbling upon Bobby's Instagram story, Patrick saw that Bobby was at a party surrounded by friends. Frustration boiled within him as he questioned why he had to be different, unable to do things his peers could. He decided to go out, not caring about anything else. Not wanting to encounter his parents and Darcy, Patrick slipped out through the window. Initially feeling fine as he walked along the quiet streets, he decided to explore further. However, as he reached a bustling street crowded with people, a wave of panic washed over him. His chest tightened, and he struggled to breathe. Suddenly, everything around him began to spin, and he found himself collapsing to the ground. Just then he heard a voice beside him. A hand covered his eyes, and he felt a hug from someone who smelled like Bobby. Surprisingly, he began to calm down, and with a slight gap in the hand covering his eyes, he glimpsed the bracelet he had given Bobby. Softly, he uttered, "Bobby." Bobby replied, "It's me. Are you okay? Can you stand?" With Bobby's support, Patrick managed to stand, Bobby's hand still shielding his eyes. Bobby held Patrick's hand with his other free hand and reassured him that he would walk him home, urging him to follow closely. Patrick expressed he could still hear the people around them, to which Bobby responded by telling him a story to distract him. He began telling the story of the three billy goats gruff, but Patrick interjected, remarking that the story was for kids. Bobby didn't stop anyways and continued till they got home. Bobby removed his hand from Patrick's eyes, revealing that they were standing in front of his room window. Confused, Patrick asked, "Why are we at my window instead of the door?" Bobby scratched his head, sheepishly replying, "I'm just used to using your window." Patrick suddenly recalled that he had also exited through the window earlier and simply said, "Never mind." As they climbed in through the window and entered Patrick's room, Bobby asked, "Are you okay?" At that moment, Patrick burst into tears, hugging Bobby tightly. Bobby remained silent, gently stroking Patrick's hair as he cried in his arms. Patrick's face remained buried in Bobby's shoulder even after he had finished crying. Bobby gently asked, "Are you done crying?" And Patrick nodded silently. Bobby attempted to pull Patrick away, but he clung to Bobby like glue, admitting, "I'm embarrassed. I've never cried this much in front of anyone." Bobby managed to gently pull Patrick away, cupping his face and assuring him, "You can cry to me whenever you feel like it. My shoulder is always here for you." Suddenly, Patrick changed the subject, asking, "Did you enjoy the party?" Surprised, Bobby asked how Patrick knew he was at a party. Patrick explained that he had stumbled upon Bobby's Instagram story. Bobby confessed that he had intended to come straight home to see Patrick, but his friends had dragged him to the party. He had escaped as soon as he got the chance, and was on his way to see Patrick when he found him on the street. Patrick asked, "Why would you leave your friends for me?" Bobby replied, "You're my friend too, and I enjoy spending time with you. Besides, they're not really my friends. I probably won't see them again after graduation." Patrick remarked, "You'll eventually get bored with me." "I'm offended. Is that how little you think of me?" Bobby retorted. Patrick apologized, "I'm sorry. I'm just frustrated with myself. I couldn't even attend your birthday party or go watch a movie with you. I want to try and get over this. Can you help me?" Bobby smiled warmly, reassuring Patrick, "Of course. I'm always here for you. It would be nice if we could go to college together." Patrick lowered his head, expressing, "What if I can't do it?" Bobby gently lifted Patrick's face, affirming, "You can. Even if you can't, I won't leave your side. You're stuck with me." Patrick told his parents that they didn't have to move anymore for his sake. His parents asked if he was sure, and Patrick replied that he was, and that he is ready to overcome his sickness. Patrick introduced Bobby to his family, expecting some surprise, but they didn't react as he anticipated. They said they already knew Bobby and were aware of the time Patrick and Bobby had been spending together in his room. Bobby told Patrick that he wanted to take him somewhere, assuring him there were no people there and they were going to take a taxi, so it would be okay. Despite feeling terrified, even in the taxi where he could still see people through the window, Patrick agreed to go. On the day of their outing, Patrick anxiously awaited Bobby's arrival, dressed in his usual attire for home. Darcy entered his room, eyeing him critically, and remarked, "Is this what you're wearing for the date?" Patrick hastily denied it, insisting, "It's not a date." Darcy sighed and rummaged through Patrick's wardrobe, realizing that none of his clothes were suitable for going out, since he rarely left the house. Eventually, she managed to find an outfit for him and handed it to him. Overwhelmed with emotion, Patrick looked at Darcy with teary eyes and hugged her tightly. This was the first time his sister was being nice to him. Darcy pushed him away, remarking, "You should buy new clothes," before leaving the room. As they prepared to leave, Bobby made his way to the window. Patrick quipped, "Are you allergic to doors?" Bobby chuckled sheepishly, and they both headed towards the door. In the taxi, Patrick asked Bobby to tell him a story to distract him, then added, "But no kids' stories, please." Bobby smirked mischievously and began to tell the story of the three little pigs. Patrick sighed heavily, realizing that Bobby wouldn't stop now that he had started. The taxi brought them to an amusement park, and as they got out and entered, Bobby asked, "Have you ever been to an amusement park?" Patrick admitted, "No, why are there no people here? Did you rent the entire place?" Bobby chuckled and responded, "I'm not that rich. We snuck in, and we will get into trouble if we're caught." Patrick then said, "Then we should leave," but Bobby replied, "No, don't worry. I'm not going to let us get caught," as he took Patrick's hand into his own. As they wandered around, Patrick remarked, "There's nothing we can do here. Everything's closed." Bobby smiled and replied, "We came to watch the stars. They're brighter and more beautiful from here." Leading Patrick to the top of a building in the park, Bobby pointed out the stunning night sky. Patrick gazed up, saying, "They really are." While they admired the stars, Bobby noticed a security guard patrolling nearby and quickly took Patrick's hand, whispering, "We need to leave." They hastily ran off and ended up at a bus station, which thankfully was empty. Bobby suggested, "Since we're here, should we take a bus home instead?" Peeking into the empty bus, he added, "It's empty." Patrick hesitantly nodded, and they both boarded the bus and took their seats. Patrick felt relaxed as it was just him and Bobby on the bus, but suddenly, a crowd of people appeared out of nowhere, flooding onto the bus. Patrick felt overwhelmed, struggling to breathe as his palms grew sweaty. Just then, Patrick felt Bobby's hand on his face. Bobby gently turned Patrick to face him and said, "Just focus on me." Bobby suddenly asked, "Are you sleepy?" "I am," and pretended to yawn. He covered Patrick's eyes with his hand, guiding his head to rest on his shoulder, while he rested his own head on Patrick's, saying, "Let's get some sleep. We'll be home before you know it." A few minutes later, Bobby opened his eyes to find Patrick peacefully asleep. With a smile, he gently caressed Patrick's cheeks and lips with his thumb. In the following days, Bobby helped Patrick overcome his anxiety. He gradually exposed Patrick to different environments, starting with places with no people, then gradually introducing him to areas with fewer people, and eventually to places with more people. Patrick gradually started getting better. One day, Bobby asked Patrick if he had ever played video games. Patrick shook his head and Bobby suggested, "Do you want to come to my place then? I'll teach you. I always come to your place, but you've never been to mine." Patrick agreed, and they both headed to Bobby's room. Before starting, Bobby pulled out 2 candies from a drawer filled with sweets and handed one to Patrick, saying, "Playing games with a candy in your mouth is the right way." Patrick shook his head and unwrapped the candy before popping it into his mouth. Bobby sat close to Patrick, holding his hand as they both navigated the game console with candies in their mouths. Suddenly, Bobby asked, "What flavor is your candy?" Patrick replied, "Pineapple." Without warning, Bobby removed his own candy from his mouth and placed it into Patrick's, then exchanged their candies, saying, "I prefer the pineapple flavor." Patrick was stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at Bobby, his heart racing and his breath catching in his throat. Acting on impulse, he leaned in, removing the candy from both his and Bobby's mouths, and kissed him. After pulling away from the kiss, he waited anxiously for Bobby's reaction, but Bobby remained unfazed, nonchalantly retrieving his candy and continuing with the game. Unable to focus, Patrick kept stealing glances at Bobby, longing for a response that never came. Unable to stand it anymore, he made an excuse and went back to his room. In the days following the kiss, neither Patrick nor Bobby spoke about it. Whenever Patrick saw Bobby, he felt a knot of discomfort in his stomach, his heart racing, and his breath catching, just like his panic attacks. Thinking that his symptoms were worsening, Patrick approached his mom for his medication, which he had recently decided to stop taking due to his improved condition. She showed him to the drawer where she kept it. That night, as soon as Bobby entered Patrick's room, Patrick seized him and pressed him against the wall. "Why do I get panic attacks every time I see you?" he asked. Bobby replied, "Does the panic attack make you want to kiss me?" Patrick retorted, "I thought you forgot about that. You never spoke about it." Bobby confessed, "You never spoke about it either. I thought you didn't want to, so I never brought it up." Patrick wrapped his arms around Bobby's waist, drawing closer to his lips. Hovering near Bobby's mouth, he said, "I want to taste your lips again," then kissed him. At first surprised, Bobby quickly reciprocated the kiss. Bobby's kiss was gentle and passionate. Patrick's was hungry and desperate, his breaths heavy with longing. Patrick moved from Bobby's lips to his jaw and then to his neck, simultaneously attempting to open Bobby's belt. Bobby abruptly pulled away from the kiss, halting Patrick's hand. "What are you doing?" Bobby asked, his voice tinged with surprise. Patrick responded, "I want to sleep with you." Taken aback, Bobby pushed him away, asking, "Are you okay?" Patrick moved closer to Bobby once again, wrapping his arms around Bobby's waist and kissing his again. Bobby gently pulled Patrick back, cupping his face in his hands. Patrick questioned, "Don't you want to do it with me?" Bobby replied, "We're not even dating yet." Patrick countered, "It doesn't matter." Bobby insisted, "It does. I don't want us to just have sex. I want us to make love." Patrick, persistent and eager, argued, "It's the same thing," as he attempted to reach into Bobby's jeans. Quickly stopping Patrick's hand, Bobby reiterated, "It's not." Patrick then declared, I love you. What about you? Surprised, Bobby stuttered, I love you too. Patrick immediately said, see, we both love each other, so if we do it, it will be lovemaking. Bobby sighed heavily, and Patrick started kissing him again. As Bobby attempted to push Patrick away, his eyes fell upon a pill bottle on Patrick's table. He gently pushed Patrick back, asking him to sit on the bed and wait for him. Patrick excitedly went to the bed and Bobby examined the drug. Bobby stepped out and encountered Patrick's mom, showing her the pill bottle. He asked what it was. Her expression turned to shock as she recognized it as her own. She concluded that Patrick must have accidentally taken the wrong medication and asked if he was okay. Bobby assured her he would take care of him. As Bobby returned to the room, Patrick hugged him, sulking, saying, I thought you left. He then kissed Bobby, starting from his chest, trailing up to his Adam's apple, and finally landing on his lips. Bobby engaged him, kissing back and leading him to the bed. As they lay intertwined, their kisses deepening, Bobby suddenly wrapped Patrick in a blanket and tied him up. Patrick tried to move, but couldn't. Bobby lay down beside Patrick, who rolled towards him, trying to kiss him. Bobby blocked Patrick's mouth saying, not today honey, then kissed Patrick's forehead and held him in his arms, Patrick's back facing him. They both eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Patrick slowly opened his eyes to find Bobby sitting on the bed, his gaze fixed upon him. As memories from the previous night flooded back, Patrick felt a surge of embarrassment and shame. Wanting to conceal himself beneath the covers, he realized he was tied up. Can you untie me? Patrick murmured. Bobby released him and asked, are you feeling okay now? With his head lowered, Patrick muttered, I'm sorry, I don't think I can face you right now, before hiding under the blanket. Bobby said with a smirk, don't be embarrassed for too long, I'll be waiting, before leaving. Patrick emerged from the blanket, suddenly recalling when Bobby said he loved him. He quickly rose and climbed through Bobby's window into his room. Surprised, Bobby remarked, that was quick. Drawing near to Bobby, Patrick asked, did you really mean it when you said you loved me? Bobby nodded, then asked, and what about you? Did you mean it? Or it was the drug speaking? Patrick swiftly responded, I meant it. Bobby's face lit up with a smile as he embraced Patrick. Patrick then queried, so, are we a couple now? Bobby replied, it doesn't work that way. Patrick withdrew from the hug, wearing a crestfallen expression. Can't we date even though we love each other? He asked sadly. Bobby clarified, that's not what I meant. Should we date? Patrick smiled eagerly and nodded. Bobby gently cupped Patrick's face and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Bobby asked, I have a football game next week. It's my last one before I graduate. Can you come? Patrick fell silent, and without saying a word, he left. Bobby's expression turned crestfallen. From then on, Bobby didn't bring up the game again, and Patrick acted as if he hadn't been informed about it. On game day, Bobby stood on the field, feeling a bit down as he scanned the audience, secretly hoping to spot Patrick. As the game began, his spirits lifted when he suddenly caught sight of someone wearing glasses and a mask, waving enthusiastically in the crowd. Despite the mask, Bobby recognized Patrick. His sadness vanished, and he felt a surge of energy, leading his team to victory. Soon as the game ended, Bobby searched for Patrick and found him at the entrance of the field. Without hesitation, he embraced Patrick tightly, exclaiming, I didn't think you were going to come. Patrick responded with a smile, I wanted to surprise you. Bobby grinned back, saying, well, you certainly did. He hugged Patrick again, and Patrick jokingly remarked, you're getting your sweat all over me. Bobby laughed, replying, I'm just too excited. Bobby graduated, eager to attend the same college as Patrick now that he was doing well and could attend regular school. However, by the time he was ready to apply, the college application deadline had passed, leaving Patrick unable to apply. On the eve of Bobby's departure for college, he visited Patrick's room, intending to spend the night there. As they lay in bed, Bobby said, don't look at any other guy while I'm away. Patrick retorted, shouldn't I be saying that to you? Bobby reassured him, don't worry, I belong to you alone. Then, Bobby climbed on top of Patrick and confessed, I'm still worried. He proceeded to Patrick's neck and left a mark by sucking on it, saying, "This should last until mid-semester break. Now they'll know you're taken." Patrick flipped Bobby over and reciprocated, leaving a mark on his neck as well. They both laughed, examining the hickeys in the mirror, worrying it was too deep to be covered up. The next morning, Bobby hugged Patrick tightly, reluctant to leave. As Bobby began unpacking in his college room, his roommate walked in. Bobby turned to see Patrick and gasped in shock, jumping to hug him, saying, "You lied to me." Patrick smiled and hugged Bobby back, apologizing, "I'm sorry." As they embraced, Patrick remarked, "Finally, we're alone," to which Bobby responded, "We were always alone." Patrick brushed his lips on Bobby's cheek, then moved towards his lips, teasingly saying, "No, my parents were always around. Now we can do whatever we want." Bobby pushed Patrick back, examining him closely and asking, "Did you take any drugs again?" Patrick burst into laughter, saying, "I was just kidding." Bobby then leaned in closer to Patrick, whispering, "We can do it after we finish unpacking." The two boys quickly parted and started unpacking.